Why did she always feel invisible when the bullets started to fly? Chief Tessa pressed her cheek against the cold rock, her rifle cradled close, the metal biting against her gloves. The canyon screamed with fire and thunder. Tracers sliced the dark, ricochets sparking off stone. Her team was cornered, Task Unit Viper, cut off, bleeding, down to scraps of ammo and whispers of hope. The radio spat static, then went silent. No lifeline, no reinforcements, no air support for another hour, and in that hour they would all be dead. She counted the seconds between mortar thumps, her breath slow, controlled. Wind knifed down the gorge, twisting every bullet wide. She hated this wind, hated that it mocked her training. Every calculation ruined, every correction turned to ash. Lieutenant Commander Beck crouched 3 meters away, jaw tight, eyes searching the shifting shadows. He looked like a man holding back a storm, had seen that look before. It meant he knew the odds and they weren't good. 2 mags left, Min Lee whispered, crouched behind a fractured boulder, brass casings scattered around his boots. His voice cracked like a teenager's, fear spilling through discipline. Eli Doc tightened a tourniquet around Chief Vega's leg. Blood soaked through the straps. Vega's face had gone pale, lips cracked. He would hold on for a while. Pressed her scope to her eye. The glass swam with smoke and grit. She tried to find a target, but the canyon blurred into chaos. Her finger curled, but she didn't fire. Not yet. She couldn't trust the wind, couldn't waste the round. And yet, waiting felt like failure. The PKM erupted from the ridge. Heavy, merciless, chewing the canyon walls into shards. Rock sprayed across her cheek, a stinging cut that she didn't bother to wipe away. She dragged breath through clenched teeth. Somewhere deep inside, shame burned hotter than fear. She was the sniper. Precision was her oath, her promise. But tonight her rifle felt useless. She had trained for every condition, every variable. But this canyon mocked her with invisible hands twisting the air. Then it happened. A single crack, sharp, clean, different. The PKM gunner slumped sideways, chest burst open, his weapon silent. Froze, she hadn't fired, neither had Beck, neither had anyone on her team. The shot came from farther, higher, someone else. 3 more cracks followed, fast, certain. 3 enemy nests went silent. The canyon hushed, as if the battle itself bowed to the echo. The radio hissed alive. A voice came through, steady, low, gravel-worn. "Viper, this is Watchman 7. Stay down, I'll clear the lanes." The world stilled around her. His pulse hammered in her ears. Watchman 7. The name pulled something from memory, half-remembered whispers from old training stories, ghost figures spoken about in barracks late at night, snipers who never missed, legends who had disappeared. She blinked hard, forcing her focus. Through her own scope, she scanned the ridges. And there he was. A figure silhouetted against the far ridge, steady, unhurried, his rifle braced, scope glinting faint under the moonlight. A chalkboard lay beside him, scratched with numbers, density, altitude, temperature. Old-school notes, precise and personal. Her breath caught. Whoever he wasn't just firing blind. He was measuring the wind, the air, the earth itself. And he was winning. Beck's voice rasped low, "Move south now." They crawled, pressed flat to the dirt. Boots scraped against jagged stone. Every inch forward felt stolen from death. Muzzle flashes erupted from their flank. She clenched her jaw, bracing for the storm. But the hidden sniper answered. 5 shots in less than 30 seconds, each one surgical, each one final. She tracked through her own scope, watching enemies fall one by one, bodies collapsing into the haze. It was unreal, inhuman, a rhythm she had never witnessed before, not even in training, not even in her own hands. The canyon's roar faltered. The militants froze, their orders fractured, fear crawling through their ranks. Beck's voice cut sharp, "Status." The answer came before she could speak. 31 still moving, the gravel voice said. Left elements circling the red boulders, Hold your line. Swallowed, whoever Watchman 7 was, he wasn't asking. He was commanding, and part of her resented it. She had been the designated marksman, the one meant to cover her team from distance. Now she was sidelined by a ghost who carved the battlefield apart with impossible precision. Shame twisted in her chest. But then something else, relief. Because without him, they'd already be dead. The militants pushed again. Claymores went off in thunder, scattering fire and rock. Fired now, finally, her shot slicing through an advancing silhouette. She worked the bolt, chambered another, fired again. The wind tugged at her round, but this time she had read it right. Target down. Her chest lifted. She wasn't useless, not yet. The battle raged on, ebbing and flowing like a tide of fire. But with Watchman 7 in the shadows, every wave broke weaker. Then his voice again, quieter this time. Beck, just like Detroit, 1990, don't repeat your father's mistake. His head snapped toward Beck. His face had gone pale, eyes frozen, as if the words had cut deeper than the bullets. Detroit, his father. She didn't understand, not yet. But she knew the battlefield had just shifted again, not from the enemy, but from the past that had suddenly stepped into their war. The canyon fell silent in fractured pockets. The enemy pulled back, regrouping slower, uncertain. Pressed her cheek back to her scope, scanning, breathing steady. But inside, doubt gnawed. If Watchman 7 could end this fight with ease, why had he waited until now? Why reveal himself at this moment to this team? Her finger hovered above the trigger, her lungs tight. And in the back of her mind, one question burned louder than the gunfire. What mistake had Beck's father made, and why did this ghost sniper care enough to bring it up now? The night held its secrets close, but knew one thing for certain. The canyon was no longer just a battlefield, it was a message. And she was caught inside it. Why had he said Detroit? The name lingered in the silence like an unspent round. Beck's face had gone rigid, every muscle locked, his jaw grinding with a memory he refused to speak. Felt the canyon press. Wind moaned across the stone, carrying grit into her teeth. She pulled the scope back from her eye, blinked against the burn. Watchman 7 was still out there, steady, surgical, a ghost who shifted the tide of battle with ease. But ghosts didn't bleed for you. They didn't sit shoulder to shoulder when rounds chewed the rock 2 inches from your head. They didn't feel the sting of failure when your shot went wide and someone else cleaned the kill. Adjusted her rifle, eyes flicking to Beck. She wanted to ask, wanted to cut through the silence with a demand. What did Detroit mean? What mistake? But the moment snapped away in a hiss of static. Movement on the left flank, shadows weaving between red boulders, orders shouted in broken Russian. The enemy wasn't done. She steadied her breath, lined up her reticle. The crosswind tugged her shot, but she corrected instinctively, half-mil left, half-breath held. She squeezed, target down. Another shifted into view. Fire, bolt, fire again. Her shoulder ached from recoil, but she didn't stop. She couldn't afford to. Beside her, Beck returned fire, calm and precise. His movements were controlled fury. An officer who'd long ago accepted that leadership meant carrying everyone else's fear in silence. Minley shouted, Claymore spent, 2 mags left. Eli grunted, hauling Vega into cover, his hands slick with blood. He won't last another hit, he hissed. His throat tightened. She wanted to scream at the canyon itself, to curse the rock and wind and endless night. Instead, she pressed her cheek to her stock, fighting back the tremor in her hands. Then the voice again. Shift south, plug 7 o'clock, 2 targets climbing, do not hesitate. Her gut twisted. He was giving orders like she was just another rifle on his board, like he was the sniper and she was the student. Ground her teeth but obeyed. She swung south, breath shallow. 2 figures rose from the slope, rifles lifting. She fired. First one dropped. Adjusted, fired again. Second collapsed, sliding down the stone. Her chest rose, fast, uneven. The bastard had been right. But anger simmered under the relief. She had trained for years to trust her own reads, her own instincts. Now she was following commands from a ghost who hadn't even earned her trust. Still, the result was undeniable. Their line held. The canyon, once a coffin, now felt like a wall of survival, thin, fragile, but holding. Minutes bled into hours. Gunfire ebbed, then flared again. Watchman Seven's voice cut in, crisp, relentless, never once faltering. By dawn, the canyon was littered with silence. Smoke curled from dead weapons. The militants had broken, retreating into the ridges. Task Unit Viper was alive. Barely. His muscles trembled as she lowered her rifle. Her eyes burned, red-rimmed from dust and strain. She exhaled, long and shaky. For the first time all night, she allowed her body to feel how close death had pressed. Beck sat slumped against a rock, staring into the gray light. His lips moved, barely audible. A name, his father's name. Looked at him, the questions choking her throat, but she held them back. There was no room yet. Not here. Not while the canyon still echoed with the ghosts of the fight. The radio cracked. Ranger Station, Ridge Line, move. Then silence. Watchman 7 was gone. Beck's eyes met hers. There was something there, fear, anger, grief, all tangled into a knot too tight to name. He stood, rifle slung, shoulders heavy. We move. Followed, though her chest ached with unasked questions. She didn't trust Watchman 7. She didn't trust the ease with which he appeared, how he had turned the battle with impossible precision. But without him, they would be dead. And that truth cut deeper than pride. The climb was brutal. Every step dragged on nerves already frayed. Vega groaned with each jolt of movement, his arm locked tight under his shoulders. Lee muttered curses, his hands trembling on his last loaded magazine. When the station finally rose into view, wooden beams splintered, windows broken, perched crooked on the ridge, it looked less like sanctuary and more like a grave marker. His boots crunched gravel as they approached. She scanned the shadows, finger brushing her trigger. Then a signal. 2 fingers across the chest, a circle drawn, then a cut downward. Recognition, old school, pre-digital. Froze, Beck didn't. His hands went up, palms open. He knew the code. The door creaked open. Master Sergeant Colton Shaw stepped into the light. His breath caught. She'd seen his file once. Old, outdated. A sniper with more confirmed kills than most units combined. Disappeared a decade ago. Officially retired. Unofficially vanished. And now here he was, flesh and bone. She swallowed hard, but her voice came before she could stop it. Watchman 7. Shaw's eyes flicked to hers. Weathered, piercing, measuring. He didn't answer, not directly. Instead, he gestured them inside. The air in the ranger station was thick with dust and silence. 4 men rose from their seats. Dalton, Cross, Trent, Pierce. Veterans, legends in their own right. No salutes, no ceremony. Just eyes heavy with a weight felt but didn't yet understand. Shaw spoke 2 words. Sentinel Accord. The room shifted. Didn't recognize the phrase, but the way Beck stiffened told her everything. This wasn't myth. This wasn't rumor. It was real. She gripped her rifle, pulse hammering. Shaw spread a map across the table, grease pencil marks cutting across terrain like scars. His voice low, steady. When the system fails, we don't. His heart beat sharp in her throat. This wasn't just survival. This was something else. Something older. Something hidden. She glanced at Beck. His eyes lingered on Shaw, but his thoughts were elsewhere. Detroit, his father. Stomach tightened. She wasn't sure if this station was sanctuary or the first step into something darker. And somewhere inside, anger still smoldered. Because she had survived the canyon. She had held her rifle, bled into the dirt, refused to fold. But history would remember Watchman 7 as the savior, not her. And that, she thought bitterly, was its own kind of wound. Why did follow him inside? Every instinct told her to stay outside, to keep her back against stone and her rifle trained on the canyon. But something in Beck's eyes, something hollow and unspoken, pushed her steps forward into the ranger station. The room smelled of dust and oil. Wooden beams sagged under the years, yet the place was arranged with precision. Angles covered, lines of sight drawn, every chair, every weapon placed with intention. It wasn't a hideout. It was a firing position that thought like a home. 4 men studied her the moment she entered. Dalton, built like a wall. Cross, eyes sharp, suspicion carved into his face. Trent, calm, compact, a medic's steadiness in his posture. Pierce, glasses catching the dim light, intellect radiating like cold fire. Felt their eyes weigh her, measuring, not trusting, not welcoming. Shaw stood at the center, map spread across a table with use. His hand rested flat against it, grease pencil lines cut across terrain like veins. "Sentinel Accord," he said again. The words hung heavy, like a creed spoken only in whispers. Didn't speak. She glanced at Beck, searching his face. He didn't look surprised, just burdened. Cross finally broke the silence. His rifle lifted, barrel square at Beck's chest. "Talk is cheap. Who are you really serving?" His finger hovered near the trigger. His chest tightened. She shifted subtly, rifle angled just enough, breath caught. She didn't blink. If Cross fired, she would. Beck's voice cut low, steady. "Detroit, 1990, my father's line. Check the south stairs twice." The words landed like stone. Cross froze. His eyes flicked to Shaw. Shaw gave the faintest nod. Cross lowered the rifle, slowly, reluctantly. The room exhaled together. His pulse thundered, but she kept her expression still. She wanted answers, needed them, but she held her tongue. Silence bought survival. Shaw's gaze moved to her. Those eyes, weathered, unblinking, seemed to see through skin. "You hold steady," he said simply. Lips parted, but no words came. Praise wasn't what she felt. Resentment burned hotter. She wanted to spit it back steady. She had been drowning out there while he picked targets from a ridge, a ghost saving her team while she fought to matter. Instead, she swallowed it, because this wasn't the place. The conversation shifted. Listened as Beck and Shaw traded words she didn't fully grasp. Meridian, compromised comms, Admiral Rusk, a grid hidden inside civilian infrastructure. The names tumbled like stones in the dark, each one heavier than the last. Her gut nodded. This wasn't about one canyon ambush. This was about something larger, something old, something she hadn't chosen but was already inside. Leaned closer when Shaw's finger stabbed the map. "That's why they tried to kill you here. Node, not random, not bad luck. They funneled you into the canyon because Meridian still breathes." Meridian. The word felt like a curse. Forced herself to speak. "What is it, really?" Pierce adjusted his glasses, voice thin but sharp. "Cold War skeleton, off-book relay grid, microwave towers, survey stations, fiber splices, official cover, environmental monitoring, reality, shadow network, moving intelligence where no one could see." Shaw's voice cut over him. It never died, just updated, hidden in plain sight, and someone still running it. His throat went dry. She thought of the canyon, the ambush, the betrayal. It wasn't random, it was engineered. Her fists clenched against the table. "And my team, they were bait." No one corrected her. Silence was answer enough. Dalton's gravel voice broke in. "We take a piece off the board. Ex-KGB, contractor now. Light security, he's tied to Meridian. We pull him, we pull thread." Assignments followed, fast and certain. Beck and breach team. Shaw and Dalton doors. Trent medical cover, Pierce signals. 6 minutes of blind cameras. That was the window. His chest tightened. She looked at Beck. He nodded once, quiet. She nodded back. Not because she trusted Shaw, not because she believed in Meridian, but because if this was survival, she'd already chosen it. The desert night swallowed them whole. Their approach was silence, boots crunching gravel, rifles tight against shoulders, breath measured. The facility rose from the sand like glass cut from the earth, wrapped in thin fences that meant nothing to professionals. Crouched at the junction box, fingers steady, wires spilled like veins under her hands. She pulled a bypass, looped the feed, pressed a switch. A faint pulse blinked green. "Loop engaged," she whispered. 6 minutes start now." Beck's hand brushed her shoulder just once, a silent, then he slipped inside. Followed. The hall smelled sterile, sharp. Lights hummed overhead. 2 guards stood by an elevator, half alert. Beck moved before they registered, elbow to throat, palm to nerve cluster, both crumpled without a sound. Stared for a second too long. The efficiency chilled her. She had killed, yes, but never with that quiet, practiced ease. They moved deeper, each corner cut like a blade. Each shadow held the weight of discovery. The private wing reeked of antiseptic. Machines hummed low. A man lay on a bed, shoulder bandaged, face pale but awake. His lips curled as Shaw entered last. "Colton Shaw," rasped, accent thick. "Old Bones still walking." Shaw didn't answer. His rifle stayed steady. Beck stepped closer, voice taut. "You ordered the canyon, why?" Coughed, thin smile spreading. "Rusk needed you gone, but he is no master. He takes orders." Leaned in, anger sharp in her chest. "From who?" His eyes glinted. "General Everett, Director of National Intelligence. Rusk is only courier, is architect." The words froze the room. Stomach lurched. She had heard the name in briefings, in guarded whispers. Director, a man who shaped shadows, who wrote doctrine from behind glass walls. If he was Meridian, then the rot reached the very top. Then the alarm. Red lights cut the hall, sirens screamed. Window closed, hissed. Dalton fired, glass shattering. Darkness dropped like a curtain. "Move," Beck snapped. Grabbed other arm, hauling him upright. His weight sagged, weak but alive. They dragged him toward the stairwell, boots hammering steel. Rounds cracked from behind, sparks spraying walls. The rooftop opened to the night air. A helicopter thundered low, rotors slicing the silence. "Archangel inbound," a voice cut over comms. "Package ready." Dalton's bursts kept heads down. Beck shoved aboard, followed, eyes cutting the dark for shadows that never ended. Shaw fired last, retreating onto the bird as it lifted hard. Dust whipped around them. Tracers sliced upward, blind and furious, but missed. The helicopter banked east, the desert vanishing beneath. Steadied herself against the wall, chest heaving, rifle still hot. Lips curled faintly. "You chase ghosts but owns the board." His words clung like poison. His eyes drifted to Beck. His jaw was tight, gaze locked on the horizon. And she felt it, the weight of something larger than the canyon, larger than Meridian, larger than her own doubts. The board wasn't just marked with enemies, it was marked with history. And she had just stepped onto it. Why Pittsburgh? The question needled as the helicopter cut east across the desert night. Her body swayed with the turbulence, hands locked around her rifle though the threat had already faded into distance. The team sat in silence, Beck rigid at her side, Shaw across from them, Dalton looming near the door like a shadow carved from stone. Slumped against the wall, lips curled in something between pain and satisfaction. His earlier words gnawed at her, louder than the rotors. "Owns the board." She had heard that name before, Everett. Cold, distant, untouchable. A man who moved chess pieces that weren't supposed to be people. His jaw clenched. If he truly sat at the center of Meridian, then every bullet in that canyon had been drawn by his hand. Every scar, every scream, every drop of Vega's blood. And worse, she'd nearly died in a trap woven not by faceless militants, but by her own chain of command. She shifted her gaze to Beck. His eyes were fixed on nothing, but the tension in his jaw betrayed what she already knew. This wasn't just a mission for him anymore. It was personal. When Shaw finally unfolded a yellowed note from his pocket, Beck's shoulders stiffened. "Aaron left this," Shaw said. His voice carried no hesitation. "Your father's handwriting, Pittsburgh, steel factory basement, concrete column, far corner. He marked it before Detroit. Whatever he buried there, it's still waiting." Beck didn't answer, not right away. Studied him, waiting for the crack, the slip of grief or rage that might explain what none of them had dared to ask. But his face stayed locked, expressionless. She hated that about him sometimes. That silence, that refusal to let anyone close enough to see the fracture. The helicopter banked, desert giving way to city lights far on the horizon. Leaned back, exhaling slow. She wanted to believe they survived the worst, but her gut whispered otherwise. Survival didn't feel like relief. It felt like being pulled deeper. And she was already too far in to climb back out. The factory smelled of rust and rain when they reached it. Glass towers now rose where furnaces had once burned, but the basement still carried the bones of steel and smoke. His boots sank into damp concrete as she followed Beck through the service doors. Shaw closed the rear, eyes sharp, rifle angled low but ready. She scanned the shadows, every flicker of light a threat. "Feels wrong," she muttered. Beck didn't slow. He carried a crowbar in one hand, the weight of his father's secret pulling him forward. "It'll be worse if we're right," he said. Swallowed hard, fingers brushing the trigger guard of her rifle. She hated this, the waiting, the anticipation that something would leap from the dark. Her chest was tight, her breath shallow. She had been trained to steady herself, but training didn't cover betrayal. Pierce set up the scanner against a concrete column, lines flickering green. His heart hammered as the display lit. "Density shift," Pierce whispered. "Something's inside." Beck drilled slow, dust curling upward. He slipped a probe camera into the hole. The image showed a dark cavity, a glint of corroded steel. "Container." His breath caught. After decades, something had survived. Beck pulled it free with careful hands. A small military-issue case, sealed tight despite the years. For a heartbeat, silence filled the basement. Then Trent's voice hissed over comms. Two figures at garage level, watching the cars. "Move," Shaw ordered. Beck snapped the panel back into place. They slipped into a service tunnel thick with pipes, boots splashing in shallow puddles. His pulse raced as footsteps echoed above them. She kept her rifle tight, eyes cutting each bend. She wanted to fire to break the tension, but no target revealed itself. Only shadows pressing closer. The tunnel spat them into a narrow alley. The night air hit cold and sharp. No tails, not yet. Exhaled, lungs burning. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath the entire time. The safe flat smelled of old coffee and dust, curtains drawn, lights dim. Shaw projected the microfilm against a bare wall. Slides flickered. Letters, numbers, names. Project Meridian. Stared, heart thudding as the roster scrolled. Lieutenant Rusk, 1990. Beside him, Colonel Everett, coordination. Her stomach dropped. It was real. Every rumor, every whisper, confirmed in black and white. And with it, Aaron Beck's name, tied to a mission erased by time. She glanced at. His eyes were locked on the wall, his face carved from stone. But his hands trembled, just slightly. The last slide showed schematics, node, and two more sites glowing red on the east coast. Felt the weight press heavier. This wasn't over, it wasn't even close. Pierce's voice cut quiet. "Enough to crack it open, if we get it to the right hands." Beck finally spoke, voice low. "Inspector General, he's clean." Shaw nodded. "Then we move tonight." The Naval War College loomed like a fortress above Newport Bay. Its nerves coiled tight as they approached the checkpoint. She walked close to Beck, briefcase humming faintly with the jammer. Her uniform itched against her skin. Every step felt like a countdown. 30-second window, she whispered. That's all. The guards scanned their badges. The terminal blinked, froze, then cleared green. Proceed. Didn't exhale until they stepped inside. Waited in a quiet briefing room. Lean, gray-haired, posture still soldier straight, his eyes sharp as steel. I don't know either of you, he said. Beck's reply came fast, flat. Lieutenant Commander Beck, Task Unit Viper. Chief Tessa, we have evidence. Set the drive into his hand. Her fingers trembled, though she masked it behind discipline. Slid it into an offline terminal, the wall filled with Meridian's archive. Names, transfers, nodes. His face hardened as he scrolled. When he finally looked back, his voice was iron. Directive 9, straight to the Senate committee. Rusk will be bypassed. Felt the air shift. For the first time, power tilted away from shadows. But she knew enough not to trust the tilt. Victory never came that easy. Miles away, deep in the wilderness, alarms shrieked. Dalton's voice cut through comms. Vehicles inbound, SUVs, no insignia. Stomach sank. She knew what that meant before Shaw said the word. Rusk. She gripped her rifle, every muscle tight. The board was still in play, and they were still marked pieces. That night lay awake in the flat. The hum of the city outside, the faint glow of the cutting through curtains. She stared at the ceiling, fingers curled against her chest. All of it spun in her mind. The canyon, Shaw, her own failures, her own shots that hadn't been enough. Every thread pulled, every answer only opened another wound. And in the quiet, one thought struck hardest of all. She wasn't fighting for survival anymore. She was fighting for truth. And truth had a way of demanding everything. How long could silence hold? That was the question asked herself as the bunker lights flickered, the air heavy with diesel fumes from the old generators. The others paced or checked their weapons, each motion edged with nerves. She sat with her back against the wall, rifle balanced across her knees, eyes locked on the stairwell. Outside, engines rumbled. A line of SUVs cresting the ridge. Dark glass, no insignia, no flags, not militia, not uniformed soldiers, something worse. Private assault team, Shaw muttered, scanning through the binoculars. Not amateurs, not irregulars. These men are trained. His tone was grim certainty. His chest tightened. She didn't need to ask who had sent them. Rusk's shadow still stretched long, desperate, unwilling to let truth slip free. Dalton locked a fresh belt into the saw, the click echoing too loud in the small room. They'll push hard. We hold until extraction. Pierce moved to secure, his hands firm on the Russian's shoulder. The man didn't flinch. His lips curled faintly, almost amused. You think you hold them, rasped, but he holds you. His fingers itched against her trigger guard. She wanted to snap at him to silence the smug curve of his mouth, but the sound outside silenced everything else. Doors slamming, boots hitting gravel. The assault had begun. The first bursts rattled the bunker walls, bullets hammering the steel door. Dust showered down from the ceiling. Dalton returned fire through the slits, his bursts chewing into the canyon echoes. 2 down, more pressing left flank. Crouched lower, steadying her scope through the narrow gap. Shadows moved beyond the rock, clean formations, not panicked militants, professionals, each movement crisp, controlled. She exhaled slow, lined her reticle, fired. One figure dropped, another darted for cover. She shifted, squeezed again. A second body hit the dirt. But there were more, always more. Dragged Vega deeper into the bunker, his movements careful but quick. The wounded chief groaned, every sound a reminder of how thin their line was stretched. Shaw stayed outside, perched against stone, his rifle balanced as if fused to his body. He didn't flinch when a round shattered rock inches from his face. He adjusted, breathed, fired. Tracked him through her scope for a moment, not his targets but him, his posture, his calm, the precision that seemed to bend physics itself. Resentment flared sharp in her chest. He was what she had trained to be, what she had wanted to become. But he was a ghost and she was flesh, and ghosts didn't bleed. Then across the gorge, movement. Another sniper, professional stance, bipod steady. The duel began. His throat went dry. She knew what this meant. This wasn't random. Rusk hadn't just sent operators. He'd sent a counter, a marksman equal to Shaw. The wind shifted, rolling crosswise through the canyon. She adjusted her scope, trying to track. Distance, over 1,600 meters, margin razor thin. Her finger hovered. She wanted to fire, wanted to prove herself. But Shaw was already locked. One flash, enemy's round clipped stone inches from his cheek. Shaw answered, his shot slicing across the gorge. The rival's sniper ducked, forced back. The canyon held its breath. Dalton's voice cracked through comms. Tunnel clear, moving now. Boots thundered down the shaft as Trent guided the wounded man. Pierce followed, comm gear clattering. Glanced back at Shaw. He hadn't moved. His eye glued to scope, breath steady, world narrowed to one target. She whispered under her breath, not for anyone to hear, "Don't miss." The wind shifted again. Shaw adjusted, half-mil, shallow breath, one squeeze. The round tore through the dark, cutting stone, punching through the rival sniper's chest. The silhouette collapsed, weapon clattering from lifeless hands. His breath rushed out, shaky, relief mixed with shame. She had wanted to take the shot, needed it, but she hadn't. Shaw had again. Always him. "Fall back," Shaw barked, sliding from his perch. But he was late. Saw it, the timing off by seconds, just seconds. In combat, eternity. Gunfire roared as he disappeared into shadow. Ricochets screamed down the canyon walls, sparks lighting the dark. "Shaw," she shouted, voice raw, instinct tearing out before discipline could cage it. No answer. Only echoes. The silence after was worse than the gunfire. Her chest hollowed. She wanted to run back into the gorge, to drag him out by force, but Dalton's grip on her shoulder yanked her toward the hatch. "Move," he barked. Stumbled, fury burning in her chest, but she obeyed, because survival left no room for choice. The tunnel swallowed them, the air damp and metallic. Boots splashed through puddles, the sound of gunfire fatting behind them. His pulse hammered, her vision blurred with rage and something darker, grief. Had Shaw fallen, or had he chosen it? She clenched her fists tight around her rifle, nails biting through gloves. Dalton muttered as they pushed forward. He knew what he was doing. Snapped, her voice sharp. He didn't have to. Silence followed. But the truth hung heavy. Sometimes sacrifice wasn't a choice. It was the only move left. When they emerged from the tunnel into the tree line, the world felt wrong. Too quiet, too still. Dalton raised his rifle, scanning. Keep moving. They hauled through the dark, each step dragging heavier. His lungs burned, but her thoughts burned worse. She couldn't stop seeing Shaw's silhouette in her scope. Couldn't stop hearing his voice, calm and steady, guiding her in the canyon. And now nothing. Just silence. She bit her lip hard, tasted iron. She had hated him for overshadowing her, but now, in his absence, all she felt was loss. Hours later, in a safe house miles from the ridge, the news came through. Had taken the evidence, Directive 9 in motion. The Senate would see it within days. Rusk's empire cracking, his name hanging by a thread. Sat by the window, the folded map still in her hands. 2 more nodes glowing red on the east coast. The fight wasn't over. But her thoughts weren't on maps, or Senate hearings, or names whispered in corridors of power. Her thoughts were still in that canyon, where silence swallowed Shaw. And part of her feared she would never forgive herself for surviving when he hadn't. She whispered to the night, almost too soft to hear. Sometimes, the best shot is the one you never get to take. Her eyes burned, but no tears fell. She wouldn't give them that, not yet. The mission was still alive. And so was she. For now, what did truth really look like when it finally surfaced? Asked herself that as she sat in the dim apartment, the glow of a muted television casting restless shadows across the wall. Her rifle leaned against the window, untouched for hours. She couldn't stop staring at the folded map in her hands, the two red nodes still glowing in her memory like wounds. Outside, rain whispered against the glass. Inside, silence pressed too heavy. Beck sat across the room, his uniform jacket tossed carelessly aside. He hadn't spoken in hours. His eyes were locked on nothing, as if he could still see the canyon, the bunker, Shaw's silhouette swallowed by gunfire. Felt it too, the absence, the weight of a ghost that wasn't supposed to die. But Shaw's voice still lingered in her head. Calm, commanding, you hold steady. Her jaw tightened. She wanted to believe he'd walked out of that canyon alive, but belief wasn't evidence, and evidence was all they had left. 48 hours later, truth hit Washington like a hammer. Moved fast. The evidence was delivered through channels barely understood, Directive 9 bypassing naval intelligence, going straight to the Senate Select Committee. No leaks, no delays. Closed chambers filled with names, signatures, wire transfers. Meridian projected on screens, its web of betrayal spread across decades. Stood outside the room, her ID lanyard cold against her chest. She wasn't cleared to hear the words. She wasn't cleared to watch, but she didn't need to. She saw it in the faces that left the chamber, gray, grim, shaken. Truth had cut through every lie. Beck stood beside her, jaw clenched, posture rigid. He didn't move when a staffer whispered to, didn't flinch when a sealed folder changed hands. When finally emerged, his eyes burned sharp. Is contained. Directive 9 is in effect. You did what needed to be done. His heart pounded. She wanted to ask if that meant victory, if that meant safety, but she already knew better. Nothing ended that clean. Was seized at dawn. Saw the images only once across a secure feed. The man in a penthouse robe, wrists bound, his face calm, unbothered, as if arrest was just another meeting on his calendar. 13 others followed, retired admirals, contractors, analysts who had turned loyalty into profit. Rusk never reached a courtroom. His body was found in Georgetown, a pistol on the desk, a note folded neat. The papers screamed suicide. Few believed it. Didn't. She had seen too much to believe in easy endings. Vanished into protection, his testimony sealed. Dalton, Cross, Pierce, and Trent disappeared back into shadows. Identities fractured the way Sentinel Accord demanded. Only Beck and stayed in uniform long enough to see the story bleed into daylight. And daylight cut different than the night. The headlines screamed Meridian. Reporters clawed at scraps of truth. Committees scrambled. Whispers spread. Who else had known, who else had profited, how deep the rot had gone. Watch it unfold, her stomach tight. The public wanted names. They wanted villains. They wanted stories of justice. But justice wasn't what she felt. She felt Shaw's absence. She felt Vega's wound. She felt the canyon's silence carved into her chest. And she knew the truth they'd delivered had come at a price that no headline could repay. Weeks later, spring sunlight washed over Arlington. Rows of white stone stretched endless, the ground perfect and merciless. Stood in her dress uniform, hands clasped behind her back, eyes locked forward. The air was thick with formality, but beneath it, she felt the weight of every unspoken word. Aaron Beck's name was carved in stone, cleared at last, his record corrected, his sacrifice marked with honor. His throat tightened as the bugler lifted his horn. The first note of taps floated across the cemetery, thin, haunting, final. She didn't look at, she didn't have to. She felt the tremor in his breath, the way his body stiffened beside her. This was his father's truth, finally unburied, but truth never felt like victory. It felt like loss. Behind them, 4 men stood in plain jackets. Dalton, Cross, Trent, Pierce, no medals, no invitations, just presence, quiet, undeniable. His chest ached. Legends didn't need ceremony, they carried their own silence. As the flag folded crisp and perfect, received it with hands that shook just once before steadying. His face unreadable. Stared at the cloth, her own lungs tight. For years she had fought to prove her worth, to steady her rifle against wind and chaos. But today, standing in silence as another man's name was cleared, she realized something heavier. Truth didn't heal. It only exposed. And exposure left scars. Then, from the shade of a sycamore, she saw him. Her heart stopped. A figure stood straight, suit dark, posture unmistakable. Bruises faded but not forgotten, shoulders squared, eyes sharp. Shaw. Alive. His breath caught her hand trembling before she forced it still. She blinked, half expecting the vision to fade, but it didn't. He was there. Moved first, his steps slow, boots crunching gravel. Followed, each pace heavy. When they reached him, silence pressed tight. Sentinel whispered. Shaw's mouth twitched into half a smile. The name may change, the mission doesn't. His voice carried the same weight as it had in the canyon, steady, relentless. His throat burned. She wanted to speak, wanted to demand why he hadn't stayed, why he had vanished into silence. But the words stuck. Instead, she simply stood there, rifle at her side, staring at the man who had saved them, overshadowed her, then disappeared. He glanced at the casket, jaw tight. "For Aaron," he said, then softer, his eyes cutting too, "and for you." Felt her chest tremble. For a second she hated him again, for surviving where others hadn't, for carrying the weight so effortlessly. But the hate dissolved into something else, respect. Reluctant, quiet, real. As the ceremony ended, the rifle team fired 3 volleys. Brass clinked against stone. The folded flag passed into his hands. Stood in silence, the sound of taps fading, the world holding still. The nation saluted. But she knew better. This wasn't the end. 2 red nodes still glowed on the encrypted map. Unfinished business. Shadows waiting. Looked at Shaw at the rows of white stones. Her voice came low, almost lost to the wind. Truth doesn't end wars. It only shows us where they start. No one answered. But she didn't need them to. Because she already knew the fight wasn't over. And silence, once again, would be her only weapon. Why did the silence feel heavier after the ceremony than during it? Walked away from the rows of white stones with her boots dragging against the gravel. The folded map still weighed in her pocket, 2 red nodes glowing in her memory like hot coals that refused to burn out. She wanted to believe the day had given peace, that his father's name had finally been lifted from shadows. But peace wasn't what she felt. What she felt was unfinished. The Meridian network wasn't dead. Might have been pulled from his penthouse in chains, but networks weren't built on a single man. They bled, split, shifted into other hands. She knew this because she had lived it. The canyon, the ambush, the betrayal written into every silence between gunshots. The mission wasn't over. It had only changed shape. That night in a safe flat on the outskirts of D.C., sat with the map unfolded across the table. Dalton poured coffee into a chipped mug, his massive hands careful, almost gentle. Pierce sat hunched with his laptop, lines of code reflecting in his glasses. Cross leaned in the corner, arms crossed, suspicion never leaving his face. Shaw stood by the window, silent, his shadow stretched across the floor. His return had sparked whispers among them. How had he survived? Where had he been? Why step back into the light now? Didn't dare ask. Instead, her eyes fixed on the map. 2 nodes circled in red, East Coast, untouched. Beck entered last, his face still pale from the funeral, his uniform jacket unbuttoned as if ceremony had stripped him raw. His eyes went to the map, not to her, not to anyone. "Where?" he asked. Pierce pointed. One buried in Norfolk disguised as a naval relay, the other in Boston hidden under civilian fiber, both active, both tied to funds that vanish into contractors we can't trace. His chest tightened. Then Meridian isn't fractured, it's alive. Shaw finally spoke, voice gravel deep. Alive, yes, but wounded, which makes it dangerous. Dalton leaned forward, elbows heavy on the table. So we cut deeper. Cross shook his head, his voice sharp. We're ghosts, not crusaders. If we move on those sites, we don't come back. Silence thickened. Pressed her palms flat against the map. Her voice came steady, quieter than she expected. Then why leave them standing? If we walk away now, it all comes back. Maybe slower, maybe hidden deeper, but it comes back. Beck looked at her then, finally, his eyes locked on hers. She saw the same war burning behind them, the grief, the guilt, the rage. He nodded once. She's right. The decision was made. Norfolk first. They moved under cover of night, sliding past fences and cameras with Shaw's hand signals guiding each step. Crouched low, her rifle tight against her shoulder, her breath steadying against the tremor in her chest. The relay station loomed like any other, ordinary steel, bland lights, the disguise of normality. But she could feel the weight beneath it, the heartbeat of Meridian pulsing under wires and concrete. Pierce looped the feeds. Dalton secured the door. Beck pushed forward. Covered scope cutting through the dark. Every shadow felt like a threat, every creak of metal like a trap. Inside, the hum of machines filled the air. Rows of servers blinked like indifferent stars. Hated them, hated how small they looked, how harmless. These blinking lights had bought blood, had buried truth, had nearly killed them all. Shaw moved with quiet authority, his steps deliberate, his rifle never wavering. He placed a charge, checked his watch, placed another. Watched him, resentment tugging again. Always him, steady, unflinching, always the ghost that eclipsed her. But then his eyes flicked to hers, just once. And in that look she saw something different, not superiority, not dismissal. Trust. Her chest tightened, she nodded once, shifted her aim, covered his back. The charges lit green. The station exploded into fire, metal screaming into the night. His heart pounded as they melted into the shadows. One node gone. But Boston still glowed. They regrouped in an abandoned warehouse north of the city, exhaustion clinging to every step. Sat against a pillar, sweat cooling against her skin, her rifle heavy in her lap. The others spoke low, planning, arguing. She let the voices blur. Her thoughts drifted back to Arlington, to the folded flag, to the silence that had stretched across his face as he held it. Her jaw clenched. She couldn't let Meridian rise again, couldn't let silence bury another truth. Her hands shook before she steadied them. She whispered to herself, a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. You won't overshadow me again, Shaw, not this time. I'll take the shot that ends it. The words hung in the empty warehouse, soft, defiant. And for the first time, she wasn't sure if she meant the enemy or the ghost who still stood beside her. Boston was colder, streets narrow, lights harsh, the air sharp against her skin. They moved like shadows through alleys, every step planned, every corner watched. The civilian disguise of the fiber hub loomed ahead, just another building among many, but felt the rot inside it. She steadied her rifle, her eyes scanning the rooftops, the windows, the alleys behind them. Her breath clouded faint in the air. Something felt wrong. Too quiet. Too easy. She lowered her scope, eyes narrowing. We're not alone. Beck's voice came low, then finish it before they closed the door. Swallowed hard, heart hammering, the weight of every silence pressing against her chest. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about ending the shadow that had written her scars. And she knew, whether by bullet, fire, or silence, Boston would demand a piece of her she couldn't get back. Why did the air feel heavier in Boston than in the canyon? Crouched low against a cold brick wall, rifle tight against her shoulder, breath fogging the air in slow bursts. The city pressed close around her, narrow alleys, steel fire escapes, neon signs flickering against wet pavement. But beneath the hum of traffic she felt it, silence waiting to break. The fiber hub looked ordinary. Bland glass doors, a handful of security cameras, the illusion of a civilian building. But she had learned to see past disguises. This wasn't a hub for internet or phones. It was Meridian, dressed in modern skin. One node remained. If they severed it, the board fractured. If they failed, it would grow again, deeper, darker, harder to kill. Beck knelt beside her, eyes sharp, face drawn thin from days without sleep. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. She read his fear, his fury, his resolve in the set of his jaw. Shaw gave the signal. Dalton moved first, his bulk cutting through the alley like a wall of muscle and steel. Cross followed, suspicion carved into every step. Pierce's laptop hummed faint as he looped the feeds, fingers darting with the speed of necessity. Slid last, covering their backs. Her finger brushed the trigger guard. Every nerve in her body hummed. It felt like the canyon again, trapped, waiting. But this time, she promised herself, she wouldn't be the shadow. She wouldn't let silence belong to someone else. This time, the shot would be hers. They breached fast. Doors cut, lights killed, corridors swallowed by darkness. The hum of machines filled the air, rows of servers blinking, wires spilling like veins across the floor. It smelled sterile, cold, wrong. His breath slowed, her rifle sweeping every corner. "Charges here," Shaw said. His voice was steady, as if he had never left the canyon, as if death itself had failed to claim him. His chest burned. She wanted to ask how he had survived, why he had vanished, what he owed them, but there was no time. Dalton secured the entry. Pierce monitored the loop. Beck placed the first charge, his hands methodical, precise. Covered, her reticle steady on the hall. Her muscles ached with tension. Every flicker of light looked like a threat. Every hum of the servers sounded like betrayal. And then she felt it. The shift. Shadows at the end of the hall. Boots moving silent, clean. Not civilians. Not random guards, professionals. The trap had closed. Gunfire erupted, sharp and brutal. Sparks tore through the dark as rounds chewed steel. "Contact!" Dalton roared, his saw hammering back, the muzzle flash lighting the hall. Dropped to a knee, firing clean, controlled. First target down. Second clipped the wall, stumbled. She adjusted, fired again. Another body collapsed. Her heart raced, but her breathing stayed measured. She had trained for this, lived for this. And yet her chest twisted. Because even as she fought, she felt the old ghost pressing beside her. Shaw's shots cracked from the corner, each one precise, each one final. Again he overshadowed her. Again silence belonged to him. Her jaw clenched. She fired harder, faster, driving the fury into her trigger. Beck's voice cut sharp. "Charges ready, 30 seconds. Dalton covered the retreat, his fire relentless. Pierce shouted as the loop failed, feeds returning live. Cross cursed, his rifle snapping bursts. "Move," Shaw barked. They sprinted through the hall, smoke and sparks closing in. Was last. She turned once more, her scope finding the source. A figure stepped from the smoke, enemy sniper, rifle braced, reticle locked. Time slowed. The canyon replayed in her head, the wind, the doubt, the shame, the ghost cleaning her failures. But not this time. Steadied, exhaled, pulled. Her round cut the dark, striking clean. The rival sniper's body slammed back, weapon clattering useless against the floor. Her breath caught. The shot was hers. Not Shaw's, not anyone else. Hers. The charges blew. The hub erupted in fire, machines shrieking as glass shattered outward. The building convulsed, flames swallowing the shadow network. They ran, boots hammering wet pavement, smoke billowing into the night. Sirens wailed in the distance, too late. Lungs burned, her body screaming with exhaustion. But inside, something else burned stronger. Vindication. She had taken the shot that ended it. Not the canyon, not Detroit, not Shaw. Sorry. Hours later, in another safe house, silence returned. Dalton nursed a fresh wound, muttering curses under his breath. Pierce typed lines of code, tracking the fallout. Cross-paced, suspicion still alive in every step. Beck sat in the corner, his father's flag folded across his lap, his eyes locked on nothing. Shaw stood by the door, rifle leaning against the frame. His presence filled the room like a shadow that refused to leave. Sat across from him, her rifle laid flat on the table. For a long time, they said nothing. Finally, Shaw's eyes met hers. "You took the shot." Her throat tightened. Someone had to. A faint smile tugged at his mouth. Not mockery, not dismissal, something closer to respect. "You held steady," he said. This time, the words didn't burn. This time, they felt earned. Morning light crept through broken blinds. News reports filled the air. Meridian collapsed, names sealed, hearings closed. The story would fade, as all stories did, buried under newer headlines, newer scandals. But knew the truth. The map still had gaps, shadows still lingered. Networks never died, they adapted. And so would she. She strapped her rifle across her back, the weight familiar, grounding. Beck caught her eye, his voice rough but steady. "This isn't the end." Nodded once. "It never is." At the edge of the city, as dawn lit the skyline, she paused on a rooftop, the wind cold against her face. Her hands trembled, but not from fear, from memory. The canyon, the bunker, the funeral, the silence that had threatened to erase her. She closed her eyes, exhaled, and let the weight settle. For years she had doubted herself, overshadowed, invisible, just another rifle in the dirt. But the last shot was hers. And in that silence, she finally understood. Dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.